After ages and ages of waiting for not only for the remasters of these games to be released on Xbox One, but to also be released to the Xbox One in Australia to be played, on the 25th of May it finally happened. And I'm glad it happened when it did, because a week longer I would have had to start taking hostages and making demands for them to finally release it here. So, in the first hour of it being available to play, saying around about 1 o'clock in the afternoon Australian time, downloaded both of them in the bundle deal, played the hell out of it, and now I can finally do a review on it. Keep in mind, this review is going to be essentially for people that have already played the console versions, so the Nintendo 64 versions, not so much the PC ported version. I'm also not a multiplayer gamer, so this will be for the solo campaign only for both games. So, anyway, let's get right to it. This review I'm going to segregate into 3 separate sections. First I'm going to talk about gameplay, second one I'll talk about the visual aspects such as graphics and other options of things that you can tweak, but basically things that you need the power of sight to appreciate, and then finally I'll end it with the sound. So as far as the gameplay goes, the feel of the controller, I gotta say, nothing about this felt foreign, even though it's the first time I've ever played this Turok game with an Xbox One controller in my hand, if you don't include the emulation that I had on my PC. But as far as like this is more comfortable with the remaster playing it on this than it is an emulated on the PC, and of course the Nintendo 64 version. One of the things I really did like is that in the original games you had to hold C up in order to run, and because there's no basically that's like one setting, so you can't move the controller forward like that to walk and then all the way up to run. Whereas in this game they changed that so that you do have that option, which I gotta say is really great, especially since as I was playing the games on the Nintendo 64, I would rarely ever die by getting shot down or killed by the enemies, and I'm sure most of the people that would play it on the console versions would agree with me when I say that the thing that we would usually die from is falling down a fucking ledge. And so it's really great now in the sense that if you're on some little small narrow ledge, I can just carefully back up and then run forward and then kind of like you know, Mario that shit. So that I really like. The thing of the button mappings, which they've referred to as bindings in the option menu, is also really comfortable. It seems as though they just put everything where it's most needed to be. So in Turok 1 and 2 has a bit of different options. So in Turok 1 you can't crouch on will. It'll automatically make you crouch down to go through little narrow tunnels and stuff like that. But for Turok 2, B is to crouch, but I don't really like B for crouching, so I end up, I prefer clicking in this thumbstick for that. So there are options where you can swap things around if you want to. With that being said, even though I was able to, this wasn't being used for anything in the sense of clicking it, so I was able to map that to crouch. However, this I still couldn't have set as doing nothing. So you could basically double up as things of what you will be using to crouch. But even if you don't use that, everything's very comfortable. I mean, A is to jump, that's to cycle your weapon forward, this is to cycle it back. These as you hold down on that one to bring up that quick weapon wheel. People that have already played the other games will know what I'm talking about. But like I said, don't want to go into too much detail about it, but the control settings were very comfortable, especially as far as basically the sensitivity. So if I moved this to the side and wanted to move the character a certain way, it basically moves where I wanted it to. It wasn't like that 2008 Turok reboot where you do that and next thing, oh look, I did a complete 180 turn. So yeah, very comfortable. I'm really happy with what they did with that. What else? Yeah. Oh yeah, and if you play inverted like me, there is an option to switch it so that when you do that, you'll look up. Yeah, and the fact you can walk, also really great. What else? Button mapping, yeah, talk about that. Let's see, yeah, there's still a cheat menu if you're into that kind of thing. The code for it is the same as the Nintendo 64 version. So one word, beware oblivion is at hand. The PC version was different. I think it was beware oblivion is out there. So if you want all the cheats, type in the one for the 64 version. The thing with both the games is that when you enter the big cheat, the option for selecting all the guns. Now, here's the thing, with Turok 2, when you activate a cheat, there's these little squares beside the cheat and it highlights it completely in red when you select it. For whatever reason, though, with the all guns or all weapons option, it says go beside it, so you can't actually highlight it to know if you actually have all the guns on or not. So the moment you enter the cheat, just highlight that and then just activate it once. And my only reason that I can think of as to why it's like that is must have been an issue when they ported it over from the PC remastered version to console. But either way, you can get all guns, but just remember for both Turok 1 and 2, it doesn't let you know if it's on or off. You just, you know, if you want it selected to have your all guns and then you're playing the game, if you don't have all guns, open the cheat menu and do it again. And also in Turok 1, to find the cheat menu option, it's under options, it's not just on the main menu screen anymore. So this is the other great thing that I really love for part 2, and this is a big game changer. They added waypoints, or they called it points of interest. So let's just say Port of Ardia, in that game you needed to rescue 4 children and activate 3 distress beacons, but you needed a power beacon thingy to activate the distress beacon. So it highlights that. It also highlights some other little levers and stuff that'll open other doors. It highlights the children you need to rescue. The thing is that it doesn't work, like you can't see those waypoints until you're in close proximity to them, but again, if you're one of those kind of gamers that likes to go and explore all kinds of shit, then it'll pop up. The other great thing that I loved, and they did this for Turok 2, not the first one, but in Turok 2 they've added this setting for you to be able to grab a hold of ledges. That is awesome, because the amount of times I would try and jump from one ledge to the other and just missed it, where the side of the ledge would just uppercut Turok's chin and then next thing he'd fall to his death, either in toxic water or just down into a fucking bottomless pit of oblivion. And that's not a pun to Shadows of Oblivion, by the way, but anyway. I just gotta say, yeah, that was really awesome. And if you think that that kind of ruins the nostalgic aspect of the game, don't worry, you can switch all of these things off in the options menu. So, that's basically all the stuff that I wanted to talk about for the gameplay aspects. Essentially, they still kept the same game and everything like that. They've just, made the controls and stuff like that more comfortable and added these other little things in there to kind of modernize it, but without compromising that classic nostalgic look and vibe and feel of it. So, visual aspects. So, here's the thing, they've added a couple of extra things for the water. Not a big deal in part 2. For part 1, the default option for the water is that they have a reflect on it. The only problem with that is that when you're standing on the surface and you're looking down at the water, all you can see is what's reflecting. There's no like half translucency where you can see through the water. That was a thing that pissed me off to no fucking end in Turok 1, because I was looking around for ages for this, where the fuck I was supposed to go, because they didn't add waypoints in the first game. And turns out what I had to do was dive under the water in this specific area and go into this little underwater tunnel or cave. And I couldn't see that because water reflection. So I went to the options and I had to switch it off. And then, like magic, it just worked. With Turok 2, when you have water reflection, you half see the reflections of things, and then you also half see what's underneath it. So it wasn't a big deal for Turok 2, but for Turok 1, I just found it more comfortable to have it switched off. But hey, at least they added the option where you could change that. What else? The thing I like too about it is the graphics. They didn't change it so much to the extent where it was, I guess, bastardizing it. You know, the way that they made those games back then, they always had this certain kind of look and this classic kind of feel to them. And I'm going to use Halo 2 as a example here. And don't get me wrong, I love the way that they remastered the second Halo game on the Master Chief Collection. And the thing though with it is that I found that they sort of added a little bit too much detail to an extent. Again, it was great, but I don't know, maybe it's the fact that I was so used to playing the original one on the original Xbox and seeing those classic graphics. And so when they changed and added so much of the detail, it's like, holy crap, you know? So like, but you know, they didn't do that with Turok 2. They just touched it up and everything's not so pixelated, so everything looks very sharp and nice, and you know, it's great. And of course both games you can now play in widescreen. It's no longer that square little box ratio. So yeah, again, I like the fact that they didn't like constantly reskin everything. The fog, or otherwise known as the mist, that's in Turok 1, it's still pretty visible, but it's not as close as it used to be. They've drawn it back at a much further distance. And with Turok 2, it's drawn back even further again. And again, you can change all of these things in the options if you want the fog brought back closer to give a bit more of a gloomy feel to the game. For me, I don't know, at first, like on day one when I was playing it, it was a bit of an adjustment. I mean, I thought I was going to love the fact that they drew the fog back a little bit, and then I was kind of like, you know, it's kind of strange because my brain, like when I was playing the original ones on the 64, like I'd kill an enemy or something like that, and then, you know, your level of focus was what you can actually see, and because the fog was so close, there wasn't anything in the background that was distracting you. So this may just be a little personal thing for me, but the first time I played it, it was a bit of an adjustment I had to make, where I was like, okay, well I've shot this, but because I can see all these other things, my eyes are kind of like scanning for other threats or items, and then what waypoints are leading to, and so, you know, it seemed as though that I like had to focus a little bit more on this, and, you know, like I said, it's just a little bit of a personal thing for me. You know, maybe it's just me being a little bit of a nitpicky fucker, but, you know, again, the second day when I played the game, I wasn't even really bothered by it, so, you know, it was still great. Oh yes, and of course the lighting. They added some more lighting options, so typically it was, in the original games, there was one little lighting setting, so now they've added little shadows in some other areas, which is great. They've, like when you're shooting certain other guns, like in, what's it, River of Souls, when you're riding on the Stegosaurus, you have that, what's it, 10, I think it was a 10mm cannon. Every time you fire that now, you see these little lighting effects follow it, which is pretty cool. Other things which they did was this motion blur. So glad you could switch that off. When enemies move around, you see like a little blur, like a, what's it called, like a ghosting effect. But essentially, and if you think of the Matrix, whenever they were shooting at the agents and they'd move around, you had that blur. That's kind of what you get for some enemies now. I really didn't like that. But again, you can switch it off, which is great because I did that instantly. And there's also a certain level of intensity of it. So you can switch it off entirely. You can go from low, medium, high, and possibly another one. But like I said, there's it's not just off and then on. There's, you know, increments of it. So again, pretty nice. Yeah, blood options. So they added more blood, which I'm not complaining about. Like, I'm always up for some gore and dismemberment and all that kind of like messed up shit. The one thing I was kind of a little bit, you know, raising an eyebrow about is that in the level Hive of the Mantids. Now, these are insect creatures. They bleed green blood. When I was playing the 64 version, I can only ever remember them bleeding green. And so, you know what, when you blow a whole chunk of their body away, you get that big puddle of blood in the ground, and also other bits of blood spew out of him, and then there's a little bit of splatter around. I only remember that always being green for all of them. However, with this remaster, there's a bit of red blood squirting out of him as there's other little bits of green blood as well. So I was wondering why that was, and I was wondering, well, I put it down to two options. Now, allegedly in the PC ported version, as in the one that was ported from Nintendo 64, there was elements in that where they actually bled in a little bit of red as well. And so what I can think of is either A, Night Dive decided to incorporate that with this remaster, or it was something that just happened where they added extra blood, but they only added red extra blood. So, I don't know, it was a little slightly immersion breaking for me, because I kind of stopped and went, did that ever happen in the 64 version? I can't ever remember that. But anyway, again, it's just me nitpicking a little bit. It's not really a big deal, but, you know, it's something that, you know, kind of made me stop for long enough to think about to want to add in a review. What else we got in here? Yeah, the frame rate. Holy crap. There's no lag. So the frame rate is always consistent. So when I was playing the 64 version, whenever there was a barrel that would explode, the game would sort of lag a little bit. Whenever I was using the flamethrower especially, monsters and stuff be running around, and, you know, the raptors and dinosaurs, and then rather than being like running around like this, would be so there would be a bit of a pause, because, you know, the game had to catch up and stuff like that, being, you know, from like the Nintendo 64 era. So it's really great now. Everything is just run super smooth, and yeah, I really like it. And the other visual aspect is the fact that now there's, whatchamacallit, little red highlights on certain things. So the barrels, if you shoot it once, they'll highlight in red to indicate, yeah, this is something that, you know, you may want to shoot again. You know, it's a point of interest. I think other levers as well, they highlight in red if you shoot them. Other things that highlight in red are certain buildings. So in River of Souls, you know, there's certain buildings and stuff you can blow up. So you shoot them once, they'll highlight in red. And the one thing I didn't quite like is that everything now that highlights in red that can explode, the final time you need to shoot it, when it explodes, it still explodes, and you still see little bits of red exploding from it. So I'm like, you didn't really quite like that. I would have just liked to see something explode without the red highlight flickering kind of shit. But, you know, again, every last thing, by the way, in this review that I'm going to say that's negative, it's just very minor little things where I'm just being a nitpicky little fucker. So, you know, so don't think that this is something that I'm considering to be like super game breaking. It's not. Okay, now for the sound. The music options. Turok 2, in my opinion, has one of the best and most iconic soundtracks ever. And there were two slight variants for the Nintendo 64 version and the PC version. And now on the sound menu you can choose between both of them, which is great. They also changed some of the sound effects as well. So I'm sure most people can remember where there's those, what the fuck were those ones called again? Okay, well basically those dinosaurs that were like descendants of the T-Rex that shoot those little purple, like round fucking things at you. You know what I'm talking about. Sometimes they would commit suicide when you shoot them, and so they would go beep 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 beep. That little sound effects of the beeping, they've changed it so that it's a little bit of a lower sound now. The other thing that they changed as well was the first time you go into an Oblivion portal where the flesh eaters are, and you know Turok walks in there, and next thing you hear all of them, you know, speaking as they say, "See this, human," and the rest of the awesome dialogue. I think they changed some of that to make it slightly more legible, because in the original game it was all like demonic kind of sounds, and so it was like high-pitched squealing and then like the really guttural kind of vocals as well, and some people couldn't quite make out what it was they were saying. So I did notice in this remaster that it's a lot more legible, so presumably because they clued into the fact that not everyone speaks fluent death metal. The sound effects volume. I had to go to the sound effects on the menu and put it all up to 100% because the music seemed to overpower that. So I'd be doing something and all I could hear was like, you know, the soundtrack fucking thing, and no matter what I did, I'd fire a gun, explode something, kill an enemy, I could barely hear it. So again, easy fix, just go to the sound option and put it all the way up to 100 and you're fine. Yeah, other than that, I think, according to my notes, I don't even remember this because I was kind of writing everything down as I went. It says here that apparently there's some different sounds when enemies explode. Okay, apparently there's some different sounds when enemies explode. I didn't even remember that, but okay, who knew? Well, that about concludes this review. So yes, both Turok 1 and 2 feel much smoother, they're much better, they look more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, and yeah, us gamers that played the 64 versions can still enjoy all the little tweaks and stuff like that they did with it, while still also feeling like a kid again playing, you know, these two classic games. So, very big thank you to Night Tie for remastering these games, and I suppose I should thank Microsoft as well for, you know, making sure that us Australians also got it on the Xbox. And I only hope that everywhere in the world gets a release of this, because, you know, I think everyone should enjoy this game. They're great. You know, Turok 2 has been one of my all-time favorite games for ages now. Definitely my favorite FPS. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and if you haven't played these games yet, well, hopefully this review has convinced you to go and check them out. So, anyway, go play some games. Take care.